Sarah Martinez had always been the kind of woman who spoke her mind, even when it got her into trouble. At 28, she worked as a night shift nurse at Metropolitan General Hospital, a job that had taught her to read people quickly and trust her instincts. Those same instincts were screaming at her now as she stood in the dimly lit parking garage, facing the man who had been following her for the past 3 weeks. Marcus Chen was not what most people would call threatening at first glance. Medium height, well-dressed in expensive suits, with the kind of smile that had probably charmed his way through countless business deals. He was a successful real estate developer who owned half the buildings in downtown Seattle, including the apartment complex where Sarah lived. That's how it all started. A chance encounter in the lobby that had spiraled into something she never saw coming. The first time Marcus approached her, it seemed innocent enough. He complimented her scrubs, asked about her work, mentioned how much he admired healthcare workers. Sarah had been polite but distant, the way she was with most strangers. She had learned to be careful after her divorce 2 years ago, when her ex-husband's controlling behavior had nearly broken her spirit. But Marcus didn't take the hint. The casual conversations in the lobby became deliberate encounters. He would time his visits to the building to coincide with her shifts. Flowers appeared at her door with notes that started sweet but gradually became more possessive. "You belong with someone who can take care of you properly," one had read. "I've been watching you, Sarah. You need someone strong in your life." The watching part turned out to be literally true. Sarah began noticing Marcus's black BMW parked across from the hospital when she left work. He would follow her to the grocery store, to the gym, even to her sister's house across town. When she confronted him about it, he acted genuinely surprised, as if his behavior was completely normal. "I'm just making sure you're safe," he had said with that practiced smile. "A beautiful woman like you shouldn't be walking around alone at night. Seattle's not as safe as it used to be." Sarah's friends and family urged her to call the police. But Marcus was clever. He never technically broke any laws. He owned the building, so he had every right to be there. The public places he followed her to were exactly that, public. When she tried to explain the situation to a police officer, she could see the skepticism in his eyes. Marcus Chen was a pillar of the community, donated to police charities, had connections throughout the city. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening in November. Sarah was working a double shift and didn't get off until nearly midnight. The parking garage was almost empty, just her small Honda Civic and a few other cars scattered across the concrete expanse. She was fumbling with her keys, exhausted and eager to get home, when she heard the footsteps echoing behind her. "Sarah!" Marcus's voice carried across the empty space, calm and controlled as always. "We need to talk." She turned to face him, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "There's nothing to talk about, Marcus. I've asked you to leave me alone." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne and see the way his eyes had changed. Gone was the charming businessman facade. What she saw now was something darker, more determined.
"You're being unreasonable."
"I've been patient with you, but my patience has limits." "Your patience?" Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "You've been stalking me for weeks. You think buying my building gives you the right to control my life?" Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a set of keys. Not just any keys. Sarah recognized them immediately. They were copies of her apartment keys, the spare set she thought she had lost months ago. The building manager must have given them to him, or maybe he had simply taken them. The violation felt like a physical blow. "I could have used these any time," Marcus said softly, dangling the keys in front of her. "I could have been in your apartment, in your bedroom, waiting for you. But I'm not that kind of man, Sarah. I'm trying to do this the right way." The threat was clear, even though he never spoke it directly. Sarah felt something shift inside her, the same feeling she had experienced 2 years ago when she finally stood up to her ex-husband. Fear was being replaced by anger, and anger was giving her strength. "The right way," she repeated, taking a step closer to him instead of backing away. "The right way would be respecting my decision when I tell you I'm not interested. The right way would be acting like a decent human being instead of a predator." Marcus's carefully controlled expression flickered. He wasn't used to women who fought back, Sarah realized. His previous targets had probably been intimidated into compliance. "I've tried being nice, Sarah. I've tried giving you space, bringing you gifts, showing you what I can offer. But you keep pushing me away. Maybe you need to understand that you don't really have a choice here." That's when Sarah made the decision that would change everything. Instead of cowering, Instead of pleading, instead of trying to reason with a man who had clearly moved beyond reason, she looked him straight in the eyes and said the words that would either save her or destroy her. "You want to know what I think, Marcus?" Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the empty garage like a challenge. "I think you're too much of a coward to actually do anything. You hide behind your money and your position and your subtle threats, but when it comes down to it, you don't have the guts to be the monster you're pretending to be." Marcus's face went very still. "Careful, Sarah! You're walking a dangerous line." But Sarah was past caring about lines. Something had awakened in her. The same fierce independence that had gotten her through nursing school, through her divorce, through every challenge life had thrown at her. "Am I? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who's all talk. You wave those keys around like some kind of threat, but we both know you're too afraid of the consequences to actually use them." "You think I won't?" Marcus's voice had dropped to almost a whisper, but Sarah could hear the edge of something uncontrolled creeping in. "I think you're a bully and a coward," Sarah replied, her own voice getting stronger with each word. "I think you get off on scaring women because it makes you feel powerful. But when push comes to shove, when a woman looks you in the eye and calls your bluff, you don't know what to do." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain hitting the concrete and the distant hum of traffic from the street above. Sarah could see Marcus wrestling with something, his careful facade cracking to reveal whatever lay underneath. She had pushed him past the point of his scripted manipulation, into uncharted territory. "You want to prove me wrong?" Sarah's voice was steady now, fueled by a determination she didn't know she possessed. "You want to show me how dangerous you really are? Then stop talking and do something about it." The words hung in the air between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Sarah realized she was holding her breath, not sure if she had just saved herself or signed her own death warrant. But she also realized that she didn't care anymore. She was tired of being afraid, tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of letting men like Marcus make her feel small and powerless. Marcus stared at her for what felt like an eternity, the keys still hanging from his fingers. Sarah could see the war playing out across his features. Desire, anger, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite identify. For a moment, she thought he might actually step forward, might try to make good on his implied threats. Instead, something unexpected happened. Marcus's expression changed, not to anger or violence, but to something that looked almost like uncertainty. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Sarah saw a crack in his armor, a moment where the real person showed through the carefully constructed predator. The confrontation that had been building for weeks was finally here, and neither of them knew exactly how it would end. Marcus felt something shift inside him as Sarah's words cut through the carefully constructed narrative he had built around their relationship. He had always been able to rationalize his behavior. He wasn't like other men who took what they wanted through violence. He was patient, persistent, strategic. He told himself he was different, better, that his methods were more sophisticated than crude force. But standing there in the parking garage, looking into Sarah's defiant eyes, Marcus was forced to confront what he had become. The keys felt heavy in his hand, no longer symbols of power, but evidence of how far he had fallen from the man he once thought he was. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Marcus could trace it back to the divorce 3 years ago when his wife Elena had left him for reasons he still didn't fully understand. "You don't see me," she had said during their last fight. "You see what you want me to be, but you've never actually seen me." At the time, he had dismissed it as emotional nonsense. Now, staring at Sarah's unwavering gaze, he wondered if Elena had been trying to warn him about something he refused to acknowledge. After the divorce, Marcus had thrown himself into his business with even more intensity. Success became his drug of choice, closing deals, acquiring properties, building an empire that would prove to everyone, including Elena, that he was worth something. But success hadn't filled the emptiness inside him. If anything, it had made it worse, because with each achievement came the realization that no amount of money or power could fix whatever was broken in him. The obsession with Sarah had started innocently enough. She reminded him of Elena in some ways. The same determination, the same independence that had first attracted him to his ex-wife. But where Elena had eventually submitted to his need to control and direct their relationship, Sarah had resisted from the beginning. That resistance had triggered something in him, a compulsion to break through her defenses and claim her the way he had never quite been able to claim Elena. Now, faced with her direct challenge, Marcus felt the full weight of what he had become. He wasn't a romantic pursuer or a persistent suitor. He was a stalker, a man who had used his position and resources to terrorize a woman who had done nothing wrong except exist in his line of sight. "You're right," he said quietly, surprising himself as much as Sarah. "About what?"
About being a coward.
The admission felt like swallowing glass, but once it started coming out, Marcus couldn't stop it. "I've been hiding behind money and intimidation because I'm too afraid to face the fact that no woman has ever chosen me for who I really am." Sarah's expression didn't soften, but Marcus could see that his unexpected honesty had caught her off guard. She was still ready to run or fight, but she was listening. "Elena saw through me," Marcus continued, his voice getting stronger as he spoke. "She tried to tell me that I was more interested in owning her than loving her. I told myself she was wrong, that I was just being protective, providing for her. But she left anyway, and I've spent the last 3 years proving her point." The keys were shaking in his hand now, and Marcus realized it was because his whole body was trembling. The carefully controlled facade he had maintained for so long was crumbling, and he felt exposed in a way that was both terrifying and strangely liberating. "I convinced myself that if I could just get you to see how good I could be to you, how much I could provide, you would understand that we belonged together," he said. "But I wasn't trying to win you over. I was trying to wear you down. I was trying to make you too afraid to keep saying no." Sarah remained silent, watching him with those steady eyes that seemed to see right through him. Marcus realized that this was probably the first honest conversation he had had with another person in years. "I got those keys from the building manager," he admitted. "I told him I needed to check for maintenance issues. He didn't question it because I own the building, because I have money and power, and people assume that gives me the right to do whatever I want." Marcus looked down at the keys in his hand, really seeing them for what they were for the first time, not tools of romance or persistence, but instruments of violation. He thought about all the nights he had sat in his car outside Sarah's building, holding these keys, imagining himself letting himself into her apartment. He had never actually done it, but he had thought about it. He had fantasized about it. He had used the possibility as leverage in their interactions. "I never would have used them," he said, though even as the words came out, he wasn't sure if they were true. "I'm not. I wouldn't." "Wouldn't you?" Sarah's voice was soft but penetrating. "Because standing here right now, threatening me with them, seems like using them to me." The truth of that hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been using them, had been using the implicit threat of what he could do, what he had access to try to control Sarah's responses to him. The fact that he had never actually entered her apartment was irrelevant. The violation had already occurred. Marcus thought about his father, a man who had ruled their household through intimidation and control. He thought about the promises he had made to himself as a young man, that he would never become that kind of person. He thought about Elena's tears during their last fight, when she had accused him of making her feel like a prisoner in her own marriage. "I became everything I swore I would never be," he said more to himself than to Sarah. "I became my father." The realization was devastating, but it was also clarifying. For the first time in months, Marcus could see the situation clearly, stripped of all the justifications and rationalizations he had built up around it. He was standing in a parking garage at midnight, threatening a woman who had done nothing wrong except refuse to be controlled by him. Sarah was still watching him, still ready to defend herself if necessary. But Marcus could see something else in her expression now. Not sympathy exactly, but perhaps recognition that something fundamental was shifting. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and the words felt foreign in his mouth. He couldn't remember the last time he had genuinely apologized to someone, rather than offering one of his polished non-apologies that somehow made the other person feel guilty for being hurt. "I'm sorry for everything I've put you through. You were right to call me a coward, because that's exactly what I've been." He held up the keys again, but this time not as a threat. "You want to know what a real man would do? A real man would respect your decision. A real man would understand that love isn't something you can force or manipulate or buy." Marcus felt something breaking inside him, but it wasn't the devastating collapse he had always feared. It felt more like a shell cracking open, letting light into places that had been dark for too long. A real man would give you back your power and walk away. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, as if she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Marcus realized that this was probably the first time he had been completely honest with her, or maybe with anyone. "I can't undo what I've already done," Marcus said. "I can't take back the fear I've caused you. or the violation of your privacy. But I can stop making it worse. The parking garage was completely silent, except for the sound of their breathing and the distant rain. Marcus felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to make a jump that would change everything about his life. He had built his entire adult identity around being in control, around getting what he wanted through persistence and strategic pressure. The idea of simply walking away from something he wanted was foreign to everything he thought he knew about himself. But looking at Sarah, really looking at her instead of at his fantasy of who she could become, Marcus realized that what he had wanted was never really her at all. He had wanted the conquest, the validation, the proof that he could make someone love him. If he just tried hard enough, he had wanted to fix whatever was broken inside him by breaking something inside her. "I'm going to walk away now," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm going to leave you alone permanently, and I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about me again." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus knew that the hardest part was still to come, because walking away meant more than just leaving Sarah alone. It meant confronting the man he had become and figuring out how to be someone different, someone better, someone worthy of the kind of love he had always claimed to want. Sarah watched in stunned silence as Marcus slowly extended his hand toward her, the keys resting in his open palm. For weeks, she had imagined this moment differently, calling the police, changing the locks, maybe even moving to a different city. She had never imagined that her stalker would simply hand over his power and walk away. "Take them," Marcus said quietly. His voice had lost all traces of the smooth confidence that had once made him seem so dangerous. "They're yours. They were always supposed to be yours." Sarah hesitated for a moment, studying his face for any sign of deception. But what she saw there was something she had never seen before, genuine remorse mixed with what looked like relief. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took the keys from his palm. The metal felt cold against her skin, but holding them made her feel something she hadn't experienced in months: safety. These keys had been a symbol of her vulnerability, proof that her private space could be invaded at any time. Now they were just what they should have been all along: tools to protect her home. "There's something else," Marcus said, reaching into his other pocket. He pulled out a thick manila envelope and held it toward her. "I know this doesn't make up for what I've done, but I want you to have this." Sarah made no move to take the envelope. "What is it?" "The deed to your apartment," Marcus replied, "and the apartments of 3 other women in the building. I'm transferring ownership to all of you, free and clear. You'll never have to worry about a landlord having access to your space again." The gesture was so unexpected that Sarah felt her carefully maintained composure slip. She had been prepared for threats, for violence, even for desperate pleas. She had not been prepared for this kind of accountability. "Why?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the concrete floor of the garage. When he looked up, Sarah could see tears in his eyes. "Because my ex-wife was right about me. Because I've spent years taking things that weren't mine to take. Because maybe if I start giving things back, I can figure out how to be the kind of person who deserves to be loved instead of feared." Sarah took the envelope, though she still couldn't quite believe what was happening. "This doesn't erase what you did to me." "I know," Marcus said. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. But I needed you to know that I understand how wrong I was, and I needed to do something to prove that I'm not going to be that person anymore." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of rain still echoing through the parking garage. Sarah found herself studying Marcus's face, trying to reconcile this broken, remorseful man with the polished predator who had been terrorizing her for months. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I leave," Marcus said simply. "I'm selling my properties here and moving back to Portland, where I grew up. I'm going to find a therapist and figure out how I became someone I don't recognize. And you're going to be safe." Marcus turned to go, then stopped and looked back at her one more time. "Sarah, for what it's worth, you were right about everything. I was a coward, and I was using my power to hurt you because I was too broken to figure out how to heal myself. Thank you for calling me out on it. Thank you for not backing down." As Marcus walked away, his footsteps echoing across the empty concrete, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Relief was the strongest. The nightmare that had consumed her life for months was finally over. But there was also something else, something that surprised her, a kind of sad recognition of what might have been different if Marcus had been capable of this kind of honesty from the beginning. Sarah walked to her car, keys jingling in her hand, and realized that something fundamental had changed in her during that confrontation. She had discovered reserves of strength and courage she didn't know she possessed. She had looked into the face of her worst fears and refused to blink first. The drive home felt different than any drive she had taken in months. For the first time, Sarah wasn't checking her rearview mirror every few seconds or taking detours to make sure she wasn't being followed. The freedom felt almost overwhelming after weeks of constant vigilance. When she got to her apartment building, Sarah sat in her car for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. She thought about calling her sister or her best friend from nursing school, but somehow the experience felt too raw, too immediate to share just yet. Instead, she walked upstairs to her apartment and, for the first time in months, unlocked her door without wondering if someone else might be inside waiting for her. The apartment looked exactly the same, but everything felt different. The space that had felt violated and unsafe now felt like home again. Sarah walked through each room, reclaiming them in her mind, reminding herself that this was her sanctuary and hers alone. Over the following days, Sarah began to understand the full scope of what Marcus had done for her. The apartment transfer was legitimate. He had worked with lawyers to ensure that she and the 3 other women he mentioned were now homeowners with no strings attached. He had also, she discovered, left detailed instructions with his property manager about removing all security cameras from common areas and changing all building access codes. True to his word, Marcus disappeared from her life completely. There were no more flowers, no more mysterious appearances at her workplace, no more cars following her through the city. Sarah heard through mutual acquaintances that he had indeed moved to Portland and was selling off his Seattle properties through intermediaries. But perhaps the most significant change was in Sarah herself. The experience had awakened something in her that went far beyond the immediate situation with Marcus. She found herself speaking up more at work, advocating for herself and her patients in ways she had never done before. She began taking self-defense classes, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to be prepared. 6 months later, Sarah received an unexpected letter in the mail. The return address was from Portland, but there was no name on it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief message written in Marcus's distinctive handwriting. Sarah, I wanted you to know that I've been in therapy for 4 months now. I'm beginning to understand how damaged I was and how much damage I caused. I still think about our conversation in the garage often. Thank you for having the courage to hold up a mirror when I was too coward to look in it myself. I hope you know how strong you are, and I hope you never have to use that strength to protect yourself from someone like me again. Marcus Sarah read the letter twice, then folded it and put it away in a drawer. She appreciated the acknowledgement, but she realized that she no longer needed it. The validation she had been seeking was something she had found within herself that night in the parking garage. That evening, Sarah's sister called to check in, something she had been doing regularly since learning about the stalking situation. How are you feeling these days? Her sister asked. Really feeling, not just the brave face you put on for everyone else. Sarah considered the question carefully. I feel free, she said finally. Not just free from Marcus, but free from the fear that I'm not strong enough to handle whatever life throws at me. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, her sister replied. You know what I think. I think you saved more than just yourself that night. I think you might have saved him too. Sarah had thought about that possibility many times over the past few months. She hoped her sister was right, hoped that Marcus was using this experience to become a better person rather than just a more careful predator. But ultimately she realized what Marcus chose to do with his life was his responsibility, not hers. What mattered was what she had chosen to do with hers. Sarah had chosen courage over fear, confrontation over avoidance, truth over comfortable lies. She had discovered that sometimes the best way to defeat a bully is not to fight them or flee from them, but to hold up a mirror and force them to see exactly who they have become. The experience had taught her that freedom isn't something that can be given or taken away by others. It's something that comes from within, from the decision to refuse to be diminished by fear or intimidation. Sarah had found her freedom not when Marcus walked away, but when she chose to stand her ground and speak her truth, regardless of the consequences. And that freedom, once claimed, could never be taken away.